If you saw a cheetah lying injured by the side of a Florida highway, would you stop the car? Most didn't. They slowed down just enough to take photos, then drove off. But Harold, a 68-year-old mechanic on his way to a doctor's appointment, pulled over without thinking. When he knelt beside her, what she did next left everyone in tears. Harold wasn't a hero. At least, that's what he told himself every day since the fire. A year ago, a short circuit in his garage cost a young apprentice his life. The guilt had eaten him alive. He shut down the shop, sold most of his tools, and stopped answering calls from friends and family. Most days, he drove aimlessly through back roads, not really caring where he ended up. That morning was no different. He had a doctor's checkup in town, but his heart wasn't in it. He took the long way. That's when he noticed a strange shape in the grass just off the shoulder of the highway. At first, he thought it was a big dog. But as he slowed the car and got closer, he could see the spots, the slender body, the unmistakable tail. It was a cheetah, and she was in bad shape. Blood pooled beneath her, and her breathing was shallow. She looked like she was giving up. Harold stepped out of the car cautiously, unsure if the animal was even alive. As he got closer, her eyes fluttered open, not wild with panic, but soft, tired, almost pleading. One leg was twisted unnaturally, and her side rose and fell in sharp, irregular gasps. She didn't growl. She didn't try to move. He knelt beside her, whispering something he didn't even understand himself. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was a prayer. She looked at him, and then, with a slow, trembling motion, leaned her head against his leg. He felt the weight of her skull settle there, warm, real, heartbreaking. For a moment, Harold couldn't move. He stared down at this wild creature, barely clinging to life, trusting him in a way he hadn't trusted himself in years. His throat tightened. His hands hovered over her, not sure where it was safe to touch. Around them, the noise of traffic faded into nothing. Someone in a passing car shouted to call animal control. Another honked angrily, but Harold stayed right where he was. The cheetah didn't flinch, even as tires screeched in the distance. She had chosen him. Not to save her, necessarily, but to witness her, to be there. Harold took off his jacket and gently laid it over her thin, spotted body. She didn't resist. Her breathing slowed just slightly, and her eyes closed, as if finally letting go of the tension in her body. He looked up at the sky and felt something shift in his chest, like an old door opening. The sound of an approaching siren pulled him back to the moment. Animal control was on the way. He didn't know what they'd do, or if she would survive. But one thing was clear. He couldn't just walk away. Not from her. Not this time. As the animal control truck parked, two officers jumped out with poles and gloves, ready for a worst-case scenario. They told Harold to step back immediately, warning that the cheetah might lash out. But he didn't move. "She's not aggressive," he said quietly. "She's scared, and she's in pain." One officer radioed for backup while the other assessed her injuries from a distance. "She's tagged," he said. "Escaped from one of those exotic animal facilities upstate." Harold shook his head in disbelief. She wasn't just lost, she was property. Someone had kept her in captivity, and now she was broken. They brought out a tranquilizer gun, but Harold stood between them and the cheetah. "You shoot her now, she might not wake up." The officer hesitated. It wasn't procedure to let civilians interfere, but something in Harold's voice, in the way the cheetah rested her head on his leg, made him pause. The cheetah shifted slightly and let out a weak, rasping breath. Her ribs were visible under her skin, and her rear leg had an open fracture. Bone showing through fur, flies had already begun to circle. The smell of blood and infection was thick. She needed surgery, antibiotics, and probably weeks of care. "We can't treat her in the field," one of them said. "She'd have to go to the Wildlife Medical Center in Jacksonville." Harold asked if he could ride along, stay close. They said no. For insurance reasons, liability, all the usual rules. He looked down at the cheetah. She opened her eyes again. She didn't cry out or panic when the gurney came. But as soon as they tried to lift her, she started thrashing weakly, her claws dragging against the dirt. Her body was too broken to fight, but her fear was stronger than her pain. Harold stepped forward. "Let me help, please." They let him place the jacket over her face to calm her, and his hands rested gently on her neck. His voice stayed low, steady. "You're all right. You're not alone." Her breathing slowed again. With Harold by her side, She allowed them to move her onto the stretcher. The officers exchanged a look. Harold rode behind the truck in his own car, eyes fixed on the back doors the entire way. He didn't know why he felt so tied to this creature. He just knew he had to be there when she woke up. At the hospital, he waited in the parking lot for 4 hours. A vet finally came out and said, "She made it through surgery. Barely. The cheetah had internal bleeding, a shattered lung, neglect. She wouldn't have survived the night out there," the vet added. Harold asked if she'd recover. The vet shrugged. "We'll try our best." Then came the real turning point. The Wildlife Center had no one available to provide full-time post-op companionship for her. "She won't eat unless she feels safe," the vet explained. "And today she chose you." Harold didn't hesitate. "Tell me what to do," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Harold was given a folding cot in a quiet corner of the recovery wing. The cheetah lay in a padded enclosure just feet away, wrapped in bandages, an IV line in her leg. She hadn't moved much since surgery, but when Harold entered the room, her eyes followed him. It was the first sign of response all day. He talked to her in low tones, telling her stories from his old garage days, humming broken tunes from the radio he used to keep by the workbench. It wasn't about the words. It was the rhythm of them, the comfort in his voice. Slowly, she started lifting her head when he spoke. The vet staff began referring to her as Luma. It meant light. Fitting, Harold thought, since she was somehow pulling him out of a place he didn't even realize he'd sunk into. Each day, he helped clean her wounds, held her steady during injections, and stayed with her through the long, painful hours of healing. On the third night, she stood up for the first time, shaky, leaning to one side, but standing. Harold was the only one in the room. He didn't clap or cheer. He just nodded and whispered, "That's my girl." She looked at him, chest rising and falling, and sat back down slowly beside the glass. Word of their bond spread around the facility. Nurses who used to roll their eyes at Harold's insistence on staying now brought him coffee and clean towels. One of the younger staffers posted a photo of Harold and Luma sitting side by side. It went viral overnight. "The man who knelt," they called him. Reporters began showing up, but Harold avoided the spotlight. "It's not about me," he told the vet director. "I just want her to feel safe." Still, something about the story, an old man with a broken past and a cheetah learning to trust again, captured hearts across the country. Harold's daughter, who hadn't spoken to him since the accident at his shop, saw the news online. She called, hesitant at first. "Dad, I saw the video. That cheetah. She looks at you like Mom used to." He didn't know what to say, so he just cried. That was enough. Luma's health continued to improve. She began eating solid food again, responding to Harold's presence with soft chirps the staff said were signs of affection. She would never return to the wild. Too injured, too used to humans, but she could live a peaceful life in the sanctuary's protected space. On her final vet check before leaving the clinic wing, she growled softly as they tried to move her without Harold. The team brought him in, and she immediately calmed. "It's official," the vet joked. "She's claimed you." Harold laughed for the first time in months. "Guess I'm hers now." That evening, Harold walked beside her as she was transported to the sanctuary garden, her new home. The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows across the grass. She limped slowly but steadily, her head always turning back to make sure he was close. They had both survived something heavy and found each other on the other side. Luma's new enclosure wasn't just a cage. It was a small meadow built for peace. Tall grass, shaded trees, and warm rocks gave her space to roam safely. Harold visited every morning at sunrise, coffee in hand, always bringing the same fold-in chair. She'd wait for him by the gate, tail flicking gently, eyes soft. They developed a rhythm. He'd sit, talk, sometimes just stare into the trees while she rested beside him. The staff joked that they were two old souls who'd found their own language. But for Harold, it was more than that. She gave him a reason to wake up, something steady in a world that had lost its shape. He began volunteering officially, helping with repairs and small tasks around the sanctuary. His hands, once used to heavy tools, now handled feed buckets and gate latches with care. Every day, Luma watched him work, and every evening he returned to sit with her in silence as the sky turned gold. What changed most were the little things. Harold started wearing a watch again. He called his daughter every week. He stopped skipping meals. No one told him to do these things, they just happened. As if the act of caring for something so fragile reminded him that he still mattered. 2. Visitors at the sanctuary often asked about the cheetah, who responded only to the old man. Guides would point toward the enclosure and say, "That's Luma. She chose him." Parents and children stood quietly, watching the two of them, a broken animal and a grieving man, simply being present with each other. The exotic pet facility that had once kept Luma was investigated and later shut down. Her rescue sparked a statewide review of animal welfare regulations. Harold never asked for recognition, but his testimony before the board made headlines. "She's not just wildlife," he said. "She's a survivor, like me." One morning, Harold arrived to find Luma standing at the far end of her enclosure, staring into the trees. She turned her head slowly, met his gaze, and chirped once. It was a sound of welcome, trust, healing. He sat down without a word, heart full, eyes wet. No sadness, just peace. When a reporter later asked him what it meant to be the man she trusted, Harold smiled. "I didn't rescue her," he said. "She found me on the side of the road and gave me a second chance." The photo accompanying the article showed Luma resting her head gently against his shoulder. They spent 3 more years together before Luma passed away peacefully in her sleep, curled near the spot where they always sat. That day, Harold didn't cry. He stood quietly, laid his hand on her side, and whispered, "Thank you." Her absence left a silence, but not an emptiness. He didn't just save a cheetah, he forgave himself. In Luma, he found a bridge back to the world, one moment of connection that became a life of meaning. And for everyone who watched them from a distance, they were more than a story. They were proof that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it purrs.